Just to introduce ourselves, so Sarah is on this call with me, who is the designated nurse for adult safeguarding, and I'm Dianne Martin, the head of safeguarding. Next slide, please, Brendan. So why was the guidance refreshed? Well, it's pretty clear today that the guidance needed refreshing. It's come out within many recommendations, homeless thematic review being one of them, where neglect is a key theme. There is lots of fresh learning from the reviews about self-neglect. We needed something that could be implemented across the workforce to improve practice. And above all, we really felt there needed to be a very practical resource for frontline practitioners. It's taken us a long time to pull this together. And why it's done that is because we've searched nationally for the best practical resources. And whilst we've been doing it, people in and amongst Manchester have come to us with other parts of resource and information that we've included in the appendices. Next slide, please, Brendan. Thank you. So what does it do? Here, this was very clear, this slide, to describe from something Neil had said about a person's right to make their own decisions and for the person to be protected when they can't. And I think most of us will know about SAR Gale. Contained within that, there was the person on the one hand saying, I don't want help, I don't need help. On the other hand, they did need help. Eventually, they died. So some of this is explained very clearly, and I think it will be helpful. Next slide, please. These next slides just will share with you what it contains. There is a section on understanding mental capacity and executive functioning. Some of that's been covered extremely well by Neil, and it's given me thought that we can actually add more of what is coming out today in our appendix as we review it further. There's an overview of interventions to prevent deterioration. There is some advice on when to escalate a case. So important, again, in quite a few of the SARs, there's evidence that practitioners are completely isolated and stuck on their own, not knowing where to go, not having the confidence to feel it's time to escalate this. This is not for me. This is above my pay grade. I need help. That is just so important, because being stuck with a case, you're not doing yourself or, more importantly, the person any good. Things need moving on. Guidance on completing safeguarding inquiries, something again we felt was important because the all-important stage of assessing has been brought out in this conference very clearly, and making inquiries. Next slide, please. Continuing with what the guidance contains, there's an incredibly useful appendices, which I hope people will find useful. And included in that is, in fact, information on hoarding. And I've seen coming up time and time again in the chat, Liz Grundy has been offering support and help for that. It's an area that we do need to work in. So this is going to be very relevant. A model for case supervision, which we took a long time on. The available training, all important, which again, trauma-informed training now is being implemented, embedded, it's mandatory. Since we've been doing this, refreshing this guidance, all of that's come on stream. The legal framework, which we've just heard from Neil, and some of that I think we can include. And then importantly, there's an executive functioning grab sheet, which you'll hear more about this afternoon in Ellie's presentation. And Ellie brought that to us late on in the presentation of this when we were pulling things together, but we felt it was so good we wanted to include it. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Next slide, please, Brendan. Okay, so here is where I'll hand over to Sarah who's now going to go into a bit more detail about some of the guidance. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Dianne. So the aim of this section is to give you an idea of what best practice is included in the guidance. So please do have a look at the guidance after the conference today, because that's where you can get an idea of what all the detail that's in it. We hope it's going to support you in making what's sometimes very difficult decisions about what to do and what not to do, how and when. And we know it's not easy. I lost my uncle yesterday, who had refused all services since his wife had passed away. He wouldn't let anyone except his son into the house. And by the time his son had managed to get help, he had developed multiple ungradable pressure ulcers, which couldn't be treated. Each situation that you're dealing with is unique and involves someone suffering. And the first thing I want to point out is that early intervention is always better. You move the next slide, Brendan, please. Thank you. So in all cases, try to reduce any immediate risks. Remember the importance of building trust and rapport. Don't just rely on assessments or just accept that somebody has declined services too quickly. Where appropriate, consider and assess mental capacity and, of course, mental health. Be curious, listen, find out more from the citizen. Why are they in this situation? Why do they not want the service? Why do they not want the intervention? And what do they feel could make things better? Next slide, please. Work at the pace of the individual. Build up a relationship with the individual. This is key, and preferably with the same worker. This has been found to be very effective in helping people who are experiencing self-neglect. Identify the key individuals and agency involved so that you can share information and work together. MDTs are really helpful. Recording risks and actions taken is so important, and to be flexible and persistent, and that trauma-informed approach is reflected what Sarah has said about the link to ACEs and trauma. Throughout the guidance, we've tried to embed lessons learned so that you can see why we've said to do what we've said to do, and we've tried to base it on best practice. Next slide, please. So the guidance will help you to work out a level intervention. You might be doing this to a degree in your heads already, but it's really helpful when there's something that actually points you towards a green, an amber and a red pathway. So the green one is that non-reportable low risk, and this doesn't mean that you don't do anything. This means that you begin by engaging somebody, you see what advice and support that they need. And as I said just earlier, early intervention is really important. It just prevents all that extra resource, all the extra intervention that might be required later on, or somebody suffering unnecessarily. That medium risk level, you might be thinking about Care Act assessments or safeguarding alerts, for example, and then that high risk area where you might need immediate safety plans and much more serious intervention by that stage. Next slide, please, Brendan. So then finally, at all levels, good to seek advice and guidance, and ensuring that you've got supervision and support in place. That's not just support for the person you're supporting, but support for you as a practitioner as well. We know it's not easy, and we know that caseloads are high, and it's just so important for you to have someone to talk through a situation with, see things from another perspective, and get that other lens on the work you're doing to help you to feel that you're doing the best you can. Dianne's mentioned about escalation, and then considering the safety of other adults and children. Always remember to think family. The person may be responsible for children, or they may even be caring for another adult with care and support needs, even though they're struggling to care for themselves. So it's just really important to not just think in that silo, obviously. So thank you for listening. We've zoomed through that because we know a little bit over time, but I hope you find the guidance useful and you can make some time to have a good look at it later. Thanks very much.